Welcome back to the Cool Cat Teacher Talk Show. I'm Vicki Davis, and we're discussing teacher self-care and boundary setting.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
If you're finding value in today's conversation, please share this episode with a colleague who might need today's show. And remember, check out the show notes at coolcatteacher.com/talk teaching for all the resources related to today's topic. In the last show on self-care, we talked about how teacher well-being is a major predictor of student success, but also how the teaching profession itself can attract many of us, myself included, who can struggle with boundaries. We can struggle with not saying no. We can struggle with saying yes too much. And we have to remember that when we say yes to school, sometimes we're saying no to our family. In the last show, we talked to best-selling author Morgane Michael, a kindergarten teacher and author of the best-selling book From Burnt Out to Fired Up, about how to start our day, reset ourselves during the day, and stay in tune with how we're feeling. We also talked to Charlie Peck, 20-year educator and co-author of Improving School Mental Health, the Thriving School Community Solution, about the neuroscience behind staying in tune to how you feel and helping your students do the same. I also told the story of many of my own mistakes in boundary setting. I don't want you all to wait 20 years to learn those valuable lessons. You can get all of that episode at coolcatteacher.com/talk teaching. So now in this episode, we're going to continue the conversation because we need to learn several other important things to take care of ourselves as educators. Michelle Singh will help us reconnect with our purpose as educators. And Dr. Brad Johnson will help us understand how to become a more assertive teacher. We will finish up the show with 12 practical strategies to help you set boundaries and have a sustainable career as an educator. So now let's hear from our next guest, Michelle Singh, a national board certified teacher with over 20 years of experience in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I'm so excited today to be talking with Michelle Singh. She's a national board certified teacher, the founder of The Restful Teacher, the CEO of LCTE Learning Solutions. She now has over 10 years as an adjunct professor of teacher education. As we start the school year, we're kind of looking ahead going, okay, I really need to engage those students. But in the pre-show, you and I were really talking about an aspect of student engagement that we really need to discuss. When you think about student engagement, and what is the work you're currently doing in that area?
Actually doing my dissertation right now around the disengagement of Black students in classrooms, and particularly language arts, secondary language arts classroom. So I'm doing a lot of work around student engagement, and I've talked to lots of educators as it relates to ways that they successfully engage students or challenges that they have in engaging students and factors leading to the student disengagement, everything from issues with home life, community life, social, emotional. I mean, there are so many layers to student disengagement, and it is not because students are lazy. And it's not because students don't have discipline. Think of the iceberg. It's not all what you see at the top. There's so much more below the surface that causes the disengagement of students. But one of the things that has really stood out to me when it comes to engagement, I can speak of that personally too, because I didn't come to realize it until I started talking to and seeing it in the teachers themselves. It's the way that disengagement happens just in our education system, especially for women educators, women education leaders, women educators of color. I have noticed in conversations with my clients as a consultant that we are disengaged, just like our students. And in order for us to truly tap into what we need to really be there and to serve and to support our students the way that they deserve, we have to fix our own disengagement, our own disconnection. And there are a lot of things that causes us to disconnect. I mean, it could be traumas from our childhood that are not addressed, that we're not even aware of. It could be toxic work environments that we're part of.
Yeah.
It could be, burnout, not prioritizing our well-being and our rest, not resting. It could be having too much happening in our family.
Yeah. Taking care of an elderly parent, taking care of a child. I've even seen it where you work so hard and you give everything and you have this great idea just to have the next initiative supplant that idea and it's gone. And you're thinking, well, what am I working for? You told me this was big and now this is not big anymore. Or you have principal turnover. I mean, there's so many things besides just the exhaustion that you and I both know, whether you're a professor or a teacher, there's that exhaustion and we have to relate to educate. But that takes a lot of effort.
I love that. You have to relate to educate. I was just talking to my class. I just finished one of my college classes with aspiring teachers, and relationships are the most important. I mean, I heard it echoed in the room. Every experience that they've shared with a teacher who influenced them was because of trust, was because of safety, was because of relationships.
Well, and that's what you talk about with Miss Hernandez. Miss Hernandez was your inspiring teacher. I wish you would just tell us a little bit about her because it's such a great story.
In my TED Talk, I do talk about Miss Fernandez, my Spanish teacher. So one of the things that I'll always remember Miss Fernandez for is her ability to see me. To see me exactly as who I was, this little immigrant girl coming from Jamaica with the heavy accent, with the bushy hair, with the school uniform, the only kid in the class wearing a uniform because that's what we did in Jamaica, the only kid in class who stood up to speak because that's what we did in Jamaica, the kid that everyone laughed at where other teachers stayed silent. She was the one that made me feel seen, that told me it was okay to be me. And she was also the one that gave me incredible learning experiences that I didn't really recognize were incredible until I became a teacher myself. And I started tapping, looking back and tapping into her own strategies and implementing them in my own practice.
We have all these kids that are hurting and that need us. And teaching is noble. You talk about a profession that is so needed and so noble. And the percentages that you shared in your TED Talk of African American teachers, you said 2% African American male teachers. So 2% of teachers in America are African American male and 7% are African American women.
Yeah.
And if you're not engaged, like we need more. We don't need to lose the ones we have. What do we do, Michelle?
That's the magic question, right? I can talk personally about what I've done as well as what I'm helping other women educators of color address. And it's addressing that disconnection in yourself. Addressing the reason why you don't feel fulfilled. Because if you're not fulfilled, how are you going to show up and do a job that's so important if you don't feel fulfilled, right? And I know I have been there where I've shown up and have been on autopilot and didn't even realize I was on autopilot. And that didn't serve me and it did not serve my students. So how do we get from that to feeling so full inside where we're able to serve from a place of fulfillment rather than a place of sacrifice?
And some days, even if I'm totally in sync with my teaching, I don't feel it. So I show up anyway. So there's that. But there is this huge systemic problem of teacher disengagement. Teachers are hurt. They're wounded. They need to relate to their administrator. Some of them don't feel that. Some of them don't feel relating to their teacher across the hall. So where does a teacher start who's listening to you and they are not in their head in the car or as they're washing dishes or sitting down to grade and they are just nodding and they are like, Michelle, you are right. Where do they start?
Here's what I will offer. You have to start with acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that you are disconnected, that you are not fulfilled, that you realize that I have been on autopilot for so long. I am burnt out. I need help. You have to start with acknowledgement. And when you start with acknowledgement, then you're starting to confront the behaviors and the beliefs that are keeping you stuck in that lack of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
So you start with acknowledgement. Think about, what does fulfillment mean to you? Like, what is it to be fulfilled? What is it to feel like your cup is full? What is it to feel like I am totally connected with my why? And I have defined success on my terms and not society's standards and not someone else's standards. What does that feel like to me? What does that look like to me? I think you have to define those things for yourself, and you have to acknowledge beliefs and behaviors that are not serving you well. And I'll tell you this, it's not something you could do alone. I say this to folks that I serve. You know how there's the A team? I have the Michelle team. That's God. That's my therapist. That's a coach, and that's a community, because you can't do this work alone. I have to have those four things to be able to say, okay, this is when perfectionism is coming in. This is when that limiting belief is coming in. This is when that imposter syndrome is coming in. This is when those things are coming in to keep me stuck. And here's what I can do to allow me to move forward in that.
I'll never forget my worst. I've been teaching 23 years now, and my worst case of burnout happened when I literally had 7 classes. I was the IT director for the school at a little tiny school here in South Georgia, and I was given prom and National Honor Society, and sometimes break duty and lunch duty, and the whole thing is ridiculous, and there's a backstory behind it. But that year, I don't know how to say it, but I was losing it because there was nothing I had. And so I did have to go to those who were close to me. I guess you could say the Vicki team. And then I actually went and had a talk with my principal, and I said, listen, I'm not being able to work out. I'm not able. So I need this year, the rest of the year, can you take break duty and lunch duty off of me and let me put
Yeah.
on my tennis shoes and walk around the track? Then I had some friends and some family who really, really supported me. I've got a problem. You can't positive think yourself out of reality. When you
Right.
have too much, it's too much. The big thing is going to people with solutions and not just complaining. Because I think when we just complain, administrators just don't hear us, because part of their deal is to solve problems. So they're looking for solutions, but it's hard when you get there, Michelle. I mean,
Yeah.
speaking from experience, some teachers feel like there's no option but to quit. I mean, that's just where they are.
I've been there where I felt that I just didn't have another way out. My health was at risk. My mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, all of that was at risk because of the work environment that I was in. And I had gotten to the point where I just could not take it anymore. I literally broke down in tears in the office of my supervisor. She was actually the supervisor of my supervisor. She was a superintendent. And I left shortly after that. After 15 years in the public school system, I chucked up the deuces and I left. Now I am still connected. I still do work as a consultant and I still serve. However, I do it on my own terms.
Yeah.
So I've been there. Like you said, I've been burnt out to where I couldn't do anything else but leave.
Yeah. So we acknowledge that there is a time where you have to.
Step away. And it's not easy to step away. And I'll tell you this, 15 years in a career and you don't know what's next. It's not easy to step away, but when your health and your family and you are looking at all of those things and that you might not be here in a couple of years because your health is getting so bad and your emotional health, your physical health and all of that, then you have to make a decision to prioritize yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of us don't do. We are great at doing everything for everybody else and saying yes to everything, but we don't prioritize ourselves. And that's one of the things that I've learned to do in the past couple of years is say yes to myself. Say yes to myself and say no and set boundaries.
Boundaries is a great word. And so through my life, tend to be a people pleaser and I tend to say yes too much. And there are seasons where you have to evaluate that. So I love my classroom, but as I've looked at my life right now, there's some things, not my classroom, but some other things that I've said yes to that this season, it has to be a no, because when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. So when I say yes to everybody else, I'm saying no to my children or no to my husband or no to my dad who needs me right now. And so part of living life is adjusting to the seasons. Right now, we had 8 inches of snow. And so when I go outside right now, I have to wear what I would wear in Wyoming or New York. I don't wear these types of clothes usually. So I have to adjust to that season. And there's a season where you have to say, okay, I need to look and talk to my principal and get some duties adjusted or something because I do want to stay teaching. Or there's a time to shift and say, okay, maybe I need to do something else or do it a different way. 2 years ago, as I was balancing the podcast and all of everything, I went technically part-time. I teach 4 classes, which feels full-time because of how much work it is. But I had to make that adjustment because part of my calling is interviewing amazing people like you. So there are seasons and it's okay to transition. I'm curious though, Michelle, you're doing your paper on this right now for your dissertation. And I know you don't want to reveal everything, but are there initially some low hanging fruit that you can point teachers to help them with this?
It's so much bigger than engagement. It's connection. It's disconnection. It's about authenticity. It's about asking for help, acknowledgement. In terms of low hanging fruit, though, what teachers can do, like right now, is do a clarity audit. A clarity audit where you are really going to do some self reflection to figure out what in your life makes you float and what in your life frustrates you. And then I would even say, make a list of the things that you no longer want to tolerate. One of the things on my list of things that I didn't want to tolerate was driving because Miami traffic is traumatizing. And I don't drive anymore. My husband is my chauffeur. The reason I no longer wanted to tolerate driving was because of what it did to my mental health. I would get so frustrated and angry because of the traffic, because of just Miami is the worst. And I wanted to protect that part of me. And I didn't want to get somewhere frustrated and angry and come to class, be mad at the students. And so once I recognized that that wasn't something that served me well, I said I no longer wanted to tolerate it because it triggered a behavior in me that would then result in me not treating someone in the best way or in the way that I know that I can treat them. I would say the clarity audit would help you to figure out what are the things that you know that makes you the happiest, that are completely aligned to your core values. This is your why you're here on this earth, why you're here doing the work that you're doing. But then also identify the things that you don't want to do anymore and figure out a way to not do those things anymore.
Unless it's the dishes, and most of us are stuck with those.
Cooking is the next thing on the list.
You can have the chore conversation with your children. I mean, when I had our 3 kids at home, there were seasons where we had to sit down and have those conversations of like, am I doing you any good by doing everything for you? Because one day, you're going to get out of the house. Hopefully you're going to go to college. You're going to have roommates. Hopefully you'll get married. And now 2 of mine are, and I'm so glad that I had them doing their own laundry. We started that when they were in about 5th grade. But as a pleaser, sometimes it was easier for me just to do everything because I don't like to nag. I don't like to fuss. But there are seasons of my teaching where I had to acknowledge that I need to have the conversation with my family about who's going to do what, because you can't leave home at home. Home comes with you, especially when you're stressed out at home.
There's a book that I read when I left teaching and I started on the entrepreneurial path. Rachel Rogers, Everyone Can Be a Millionaire. I forget the exact title. But one of the things that I learned from that book is identifying the things in your life that take up time where you could be doing something that is more valuable and then delegating that. So for me, of course, driving, but laundry. The time that it would take me to do laundry, I could be doing something that, let's say, could make me more money or could make me more productive, do something for my students that's just more pleasing. And I then delegate the laundry to a service. The cost of that was not as great as I thought because I am getting fulfillment from that, from not doing it anymore, but doing something that I love to do and having that task that I no longer want to do being done by somebody else. I was able to identify those things, like I said, that I no longer wanted to tolerate and figure out a way to get those things done and focus on the things that made me float.
Our time is coming to a close. Michelle Singh, you have so many things to encourage us with. Could we finish with a pep talk for teachers? What would you say to them?
You have everything that you need. You have everything that you need to be successful. Believe in who you are, trust in whose you are, and just know that you have enough, you are enough, and you have everything that you need to do the work that you're called to do. You have everything that you need. You don't need anything else, anything extra.
And believing in yourself is so important. Believing in yourself, seeking mentorship. There's just so many things of just acknowledging and knowing that we can do this and our profession is so important. And I do think that all of us do need to sit down and have those reflection times. I've just finished one and taken two big things off of my plate, responsibilities for this season of life that I need to have. So this is very much resonating with me that there are times and seasons when some things have to change for a good reason.
One last thing, because this is something that I do every single day. In addition to you have everything you need, it's so important to celebrate the small wins.
Yes.
We don't take time to do that. The smallest things. A kid smiled at you today. A kid said, "Hey, miss, I like your shoes." The smallest wins. I would say celebrate the small wins and write them down.
Those do help. And taking those letters they write and putting them in an add a girl drawer or an add a guy drawer, opening it up and looking at it when you have the hard days because they do
Yes,
come. And,
yes,
this profession is just so important. It's just so
yes.
important. Kids need us. So thank you for your work, Michelle.
You could connect with me at empty2empowered. So the word empty, the number 2 empowered.com. And that's how we can stay connected.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today, Michelle. You've given us a lot to think about. So here's my question. Have you celebrated your small wins today? At the end of the day, do you share your complaints and your problems? It's okay to vent, but do you also share your wins? I realized I was just complaining at the end of the day. I work hard now to ask my family, what are your wins of the day? What are your wins of the week or the month? Because gratitude is worth cultivating. And when we only focus on the negative, we often just see that. This subtle shift from unloading the dirty laundry to celebrating the shining moment is a great way to refocus your family and yourself on gratitude for your many blessings. I have a blog post I'll put in the show notes about the power of gratitude and what it does to our mood. I also did a whole episode on gratitude and the influence on our minds and our hearts and our lives. And you can see that episode at coolcatteacher.com/talk gratitude. So welcome back to the Cool Cat Teacher Talk Show. If you're finding these conversations valuable, make sure you go to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, or tune in every week here on this station and never miss an episode. Today's show notes with links in our guest books and resources can be found at coolcatteacher.com/talk teaching. We're going to talk to Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author of 15 books. Brad's insights on teacher empowerment are exactly what I needed to hear, and I think that it'll help you too. Dr. Brad Johnson is a best-selling author of 15 books, including Dear Teacher, Putting Teachers First. He is a leading voice in leadership motivation and teacher empowerment with a real voice also for administrators. And Brad, every time you come on the show stats go through the roof and you just have so many great things to say. So let's talk about this book you've written for teachers. Tell me about the book and why did you write it?
It's called Becoming a More Assertive Teacher. And I wrote it because the 30-something years that I've been in education, one of the things I realized is that we understand that teaching is what we call a high agreeable profession. And by that, what I mean is there's something called the big five personality traits. There's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. And I always like the joke with the neuroticism. If you aren't there yet, hang on, you'll get there as a teacher. We all become neurotic. But agreeableness is a trait that is ingrained within teachers. In fact, teaching is one of three fields, teaching, nursing, and social work, that tend to draw people that are called high agreeableness. And when we think about agreeableness, it's people that are kind, caring, empathetic, supporting. So those are traits you want with teachers. The problem with that, though, is because it is a personality trait. It's something that we do and we are without even realizing it. So there are some challenges that come with having that high agreeableness. And so people that tend to be high agreeable also have trouble setting boundaries, have trouble saying no. They hate conflict. Even when they hear the word assertive, they think negative. They think like being mean, but that's not what assertiveness is. Assertiveness is learning how to set those boundaries, how to say no. It's about self-care. It helps us prevent burnout as teachers, but it is a skill set that we have to develop because we are so other focused. I'll ask teachers, how many of you, are always willing to stand up or fight for your colleagues or for your teachers? And teachers will, because they're so other focused, but they very rarely stand up for themselves or fight
Oh,
for
wow.
themselves.
Some people think assertive and aggressive is the same thing, but it's not.
No, low agreeableness is more like what we have is the terms passive and aggressive. And so those are extreme ends of that. In the middle is assertive. That's the sweet spot. See, aggressive people tend to be low agreeable, but they're still not assertive. They're aggressive. That's why I said we oftentimes link those together. But the reality is assertiveness is learning to stand up for yourself, to speak up for yourself, to set the boundaries, but you still do it in a way that doesn't infringe on other people or that still respects them and their space. That's the key, because aggressive people don't really care about other people. And, they don't think, am I hurting them or whatever? So that's where assertiveness is a skill set that aggressive people need to learn so that they still care about other people, and that especially high agreeable people need to learn so that they are able to take care of themselves. It's like saying no. How many teachers say yes to everything? Sometimes I hear people, and it drives me crazy, tell like administrators, ask those new teachers to do anything because they'll say yes.
Oh,
All you're doing is setting them up for failure from the beginning or to burn out very quickly. Horrible, horrible advice. But I have heard that before.
so I'm going to raise my hand and say it's taken many, many years to get to a better place, to the point that I was ready to leave or some things were going to have to change. But I was just rereading something from about 8 years ago in my journal. And one thing that has happened to me over time is I literally go to pre-planning and a schedule change just happened that gave me more classes. So one year I show up, all of a sudden the schedule changed from the week before. I end up with 5 days a week, I have 6 periods, and then 2 more days a week, I have 7 periods in a 7-period day, plus IT, plus prom, plus homeroom, and National Honor Society. And it's pre-planning. What should I have done other than say, if you do this, then I'm going to have to leave?
Yeah.
What should I have done? Because, that happened to me multiple times, and I always ended up feeling speechless. Why would you do this to me at the last minute? And B, how do I advocate for myself when school starts in 3 days?
It is hard when it's thrown on you and not asked, which is even worse, I think, because there is that expectation that teachers will do whatever we tell them. Sadly, I think our whole education in a way is built on that. Just the expectation. If you won't do it, we'll get someone that will. But unfortunately, for the people with that mindset, there's nobody out there waiting to come in that will. We have a teacher shortage, which is a terrible thing, but, it really does need to help administrators rethink how we interact and treat the staff and things like that, because there's not people waiting to come in. Our teacher ed programs some of them are non-existent in universities now. In fact, I was looking at 25 years ago, teacher ed programs were usually the largest population of students in one area in our universities. I think it was 22 or 25% were in just the teaching education field. In some areas, it's less than 3 or 4% now. I go through it in the book, how to learn how to handle conflict, because that's the key. We're scared of conflict. And because we're
Yep.
scared of conflict, we don't know how to do it right. And so usually we wait till we are at our emotionally charged at our highest level to interact and engage. And that's the worst
Yeah.
time. So when we think about stuff like that, like someone coming to me and saying, here, you got to do all this. Well, the worst thing we can do is say, you know what, I've had enough, and just go at it. So I'm going to go set them straight. So we know that doesn't help. So it's
Right.
learning how to take a step back, to look at the issues and figure out how that you can discuss this with them in a way that, like, okay, here's what's going on, here's the problems, and then help them find solutions. And, you hear sometimes people say, when you go to your administrator with a problem, bring solutions. I don't believe that's always true, because that's part of them being administrators, to come up with solutions.
Oh, what a great point.
Exactly right. They're always like, bring solutions. I'm like, you may not have them. You may know there's a problem, but you may not have a solution, but that's okay too. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be addressed. Learning how to handle that conflict is so important. It's a process that we go through. I talk about in the book, and when I share on handling conflict, it's a situation where you have to remove your emotions. Emotions are what bring us to that point. It's what makes us mad. It's what tips us over the edge. But we have to just digest all that. We have to think about, what is the problem? Yeah, I'm mad. I'm tired. This happens every year. But the key is to focus on what's the underlying issue, or what's the real issue. And then how are we going to deal with that? It's not about bringing up this happens every year and stuff. It's about right now in this moment this year, and why this doesn't work for me. And so when we do that, when we learn how to handle conflict, and it's not easy. And for people that are high agreeable, it's a hard thing to do. We'd rather say yes than to have to confront someone, especially if they're our boss, or, someone that's in an administrative role. So I did have to learn that assertiveness balance, not just speak my mind, but learn how to do it in the right way and in the right frame.
Yeah.
But when we go to the staff and we think about those issues, it's so important to sit down and say, hey, look, this is hard for me to do. It's uncomfortable, but this is such a big deal. I really need to have this conversation and look at it and talk it through. It may not be resolved. There may be some things that can be done. One of the problems with this is that our administrator doesn't know there's an issue if they're never told.
That's so true. I mean, here's the thing is, if I've got a 2 a.m. problem, it's waking me up every night at 2 a.m. My admin has no way to know unless I tell them.
Exactly. And so while this is built up year after year, if a teacher's always said yeah and accepted it, they may not even realize that it is a problem. And so it's so important for us to be able to voice that and to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this or whatever. And then you learn, and in the book, we talk about when you learn to say no, there is a right way to do it. A lot of times we talk about that passive and aggressive. Sometimes we get to that point of passive aggressive where we're hard to deal with. We're very negative, and we may not even mean to be, but then that creates a whole new level of friction. So learning how to stand up for ourselves, to say no, to do it in the right way is just so important. If you're overextended all the time, if you don't know how to set boundaries, if you're working till midnight every night and every weekend, of course you're going to burn out. But here again, like you said, your administrator may not know that you work to midnight every night. I had a new teacher that I did see leaving every day with her wagon full of her curriculum and her textbooks and stuff every day, leaving the school with it in the parking lot. And after about 4 or 5 days, I realized, she was going home and working all night. So I stopped her in the parking lot. I said, let me have your wagon. I said, I'm going to take it back into your room. It's going to be there in the morning. The world's not going to end. You're not going to lose your job, and go home and rest. And so part of that, it's important for administrators to pay attention and see who do they feel like is doing too much or working too much. You can't work 24/7.
You just said something in that piece that really made me think about how I've changed. So you're 23 now, and somewhere around 18 or 9, I've learned some things. But one is that I can either choose a hard conversation or to have a bad attitude. When something is truly wrong that is consistent, I'm either choosing that I'm going to let this fester and I'm going to develop a bad attitude, a passive aggressive. Sometimes, yeah, it's warranted. Things are happening that are wrong. But the deal is that if I bring it out and my administrator doesn't handle it, then I can handle what I need to handle in January, February, March when I decide if I'm going to return or not. But if I keep it to myself and I wait till contract negotiations or, God forbid, the day of pre-planning, then I'm going to end up with a bad attitude. You're really speaking some honest, true things. Now, Brad, let me ask you this. When you speak on becoming a more assertive teacher, you know how folks come up after you speak? Tell me, what are some of the prevalent things that teachers say after you talk on this topic?
Well, most will raise their hand when I ask those things. Who has a hard time saying no, who doesn't know how to really set boundaries. And so, there's a lot of head nodding. The one thing I found, and it's true, like you were saying, especially younger teachers, but there's a lot of veteran teachers that still are that way. They're running on empty, they're defeated. And so it's kind of like a little breath of fresh air and a glimpse of hope that, hey, you know what? Maybe there's still time to turn this around. Put me first, because that's so unnatural for so many teachers. But the thing is, like I said, I'm not sure as many administrators really expect that from teachers as often as they aren't aware of it many times, because we're not willing to talk about it and have those conversations and share that, hey, I'm drowning here. And that's why it's so important for administrators to be in the classes, be in the hallways, to listen, to have those small conversations so that you do know what's going on with your staff and you can sense when somebody's having a tough time. And when you see that teacher going across the parking lot every day, not just with a handful of curriculum, but with a wagon full of curriculum, that, hey, it might be time for me to help them out and keep them from reaching that burnout point.
So what do you say to the administrators who are like, Brad, I don't want my teachers to be more assertive. I just want them to be passive and do everything I say. What's your answer to that?
I don't know if there's many like that. I hope to think there's not, but I'm sure there's some, and they probably wouldn't listen to me anyway. But the thing is, what I think, even as administrators, those don't understand what assertive means, because when you do have teachers that learn to say no and set boundaries, you don't have the passive aggressive, you don't have the negativity sometimes that runs through a school. It actually is helps create a better culture for your school and for your teachers when they are that way.
So yesterday I was with healthcare teachers, and one of the trends of AI in healthcare is this AI-enabled smart staffing approach that they're saying is going to happen in the future. And basically that we all wear wearables. So what if the wearable, and in this case it was doctors and nurses, but let's put it in a school context. What if the wearable told our administrators, hey, Vicki is getting ready to burn out, or Dawn is starting to burn out, or whatever. And my one thought is, why do we need AI to do what you can tell if you actually look at me? Like, if you talk to me, if you pop your head in my room, if you stay late enough to see that I'm leaving late, actually look at me every day, because this is one reason I'll try to look my students in the face every day, is from day to day, I can see patterns. I can see that they look tired or not. And so I'm just kind of thinking of like, why do we need AI to tell us that people are burning out and they're getting tired? Why can't we open our eyes and have the authentic conversations so that we can keep our schools going forward? Why do we need AI to do what us humans, if we have relational intelligence, should be able to do anyway?
Relational intelligence is so important. To me, it is the most important skill set that you will have as a leader. In fact, we talk about EQ and we kind of know it, and it's kind of like your self-awareness and things like that. Even beyond that is the awareness of others, being other focused, because it's not natural. It's not natural to be other
Yeah.
focused because we just as human beings naturally are self-focused. And so that relational intelligence is a skill set we really have to work at and develop. Like the teachers developing assertiveness, our
Mm-hmm.
leaders need to develop that relational intelligence so that they do know. I sent out a quote yesterday. It talked about that great principals don't just spend time in the hallways, but that's where they build relationships. And because it's not just about being there, it's not just about being seen, not just about saying hi, but it's about taking the time to say, hey, Vicki, how are you doing today? What's going on? Just those small conversations. You can pick up on so much. Well, I've had a long week or I'm having this problem. Those little conversations can go such a long way in helping an administrator say, hey, you know what? There's something going on there. There's something I need to check in with you, or, I need to check in with you again really soon type of situations. And that makes all the difference.
I know sometimes self-care is a bit overused, like, hey, I'm going to dump a bunch of stuff on you. Oh, go take care of yourself. But assertiveness is part of self-care. It may seem counterintuitive, but as someone who is a recovering yes person, and I have had to learn to say no. I have a happier life. I have a more balanced life. And it's hard to do that. But I will say this. One thing I have learned is I cannot wait till pre-planning to have those conversations. I have to have those conversations proactively in the spring and January at contract renewal proactively because they can't read my mind. They don't know I'm already on the edge. And then when they put that other thing on me that I'm going to go over the edge, they can't read our minds. And having those conversations, I don't want to have a bad attitude, Brad. I want to have a good attitude. I don't want to be passive aggressive. I don't want to be that person in the teacher's meeting who can't look their principal in the eye and is always just kind of making eyes at their other friends who are teachers at the table with them. I'm not going to be that person. As we wrap up today's episode on teacher self-care and boundary setting, I want to leave you with 12 practical strategies we've learned from our amazing guests and also that I've shared. Number 1, notice your limits. Pay attention when you're reaching your breaking point and respect those boundaries. I had a former pastor, Michael Catt, who always say, exhaustion makes cowards of us all. When I'm exhausted, sometimes the thing I need is a nap. Now, you can't always have that during the day, but if you can understand and tune in to where you are, you can communicate that to others. Sometimes when I've had difficult news, I might tell my principal, hey, I might need to ask somebody to step in my room for a moment while I process. Be open with your students and say, hey guys, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I'm a little bit tired. If you have that kind of open relationship with your students. Number 2, implement rapid resets. Take the 10 to 30 seconds throughout your day to refocus and reset your energy level and your students too. One of our presenters talked about just setting a timer on your watch for several times a day. That was Morgan Michael. Number 3, practice the 3-minute check-in. Ask yourself, how am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? What do I need to do right now? Sometimes you need to take a deep breath. There are lots of strategies that you can learn when you check in with yourself to readjust, and you can teach those to your students. Number 4, start a 7-day gratitude text challenge and partner with a colleague to share positive moments daily. Now, I'll admit I started it with my friend Jill, and she and I have started and stopped several times, but it's better to try and miss a day and start over than to not have gratitude at all. Next, create a clarity audit. Michelle talked about this today. Identify what makes you float and what frustrates you, and then look for more ways to do more of the former and less of the latter. And remember, we all have those frustrations. Next, acknowledge when you're disconnected. Recognition is the first step to reconnection. One of my favorite books when I'm struggling with extreme disappointment or even depression is Changes That Heal, about 4 steps that Henry Cloud recommends we can take. Next, celebrate small wins and set it up so that you can do that. I know for me, I have an Attagirl drawer where I throw things in that drawer and I pull them out when I'm having a challenging time. If I remember the joy and the success of the past, and for me, how God has helped me through the most challenging times of my life, I can move forward with faith and hope that Romans 8:28 is true. Next, learn to be assertive but not aggressive. Stand up for yourself while respecting others. But also, choose your time and place to be assertive. When you're highly emotional, when you're upset, when you've just got bad news, sometimes that's not the time to have the conversation. Don't wait till you're emotionally charged to address problems. Learn the ability to have those difficult conversations. There's a great book called Crucial Conversations I highly recommend for this. There are times you need to talk about things that are tough or are difficult, and knowing the proper way to do that. I also re-listen to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People because I know that if I'm saying I too much, I have to also look at it from my principal's perspective and from the school's perspective so that I can pull back, have a big picture view, but also understand how the wellness of teachers improves the wellness of students. You are important. Depression is real and it happens to the best of us. And if you teach long enough, it will happen. If you have kids, it will probably happen. If you're depressed and really struggling, and if you feel like your life doesn't have a purpose or that you're losing yourself, ask for help and get help. Do it right now. If this is you, just say out loud to yourself in the car or to your TV, I'm going to talk to, and then fill in the name. I'm giving you a second. Say it right now. Go and do it. You can read all the books you want, and you can look at all the TV shows you want and listen to all the radio programs you want. But in the end, life is lived with the people around you. And if you've isolated yourself, you need to reconnect with others. And sometimes that can take some time. And making friends doesn't happen accidentally, it's intentionally. Sometimes we have to ask forgiveness. But as educators and parents, we can't pour out of an empty pitcher. We need to top off that pitcher so that we are healthy and that we're feeling good so that we have the ability to help others. So number 11 is, and I just want to be honest here, teaching is not for everybody. These students deserve our best. I love teachers. I'm saying this with all the respect in the world. And there have been times that I have been the mean teacher. There are times I've had to apologize to my students. And it's often when I'm emotionally charged or I'm exhausted that I've had to do that. I have to apologize to my family. I did it just recently where I'm tired and I'm snippy. It's no excuse. All of my family and my students deserve respect. But I know people who are not wired for teaching. They're just not wired for it. They don't have the patience for it. You know, if you love teaching. There was a time where I totally lost my spark. And truthfully, my student Eric named me star teacher. And I was asked to speak on why teaching is so great. And it's the only time in my life about teaching that I was completely dumbfounded about what to say. I said all the things I say to you. Teaching is a noble profession. But I was at a low place and I was at a hard place. And I'm so glad that my student believed in me so I could be the kind of teacher I needed to be. Sometimes we need that encouragement, but I'm talking about the teacher that is just flat out mean or abusive or unkind to students. If you find that that is you and teaching is not a good fit, in all the respect in the world that I have for you as a human being, if teaching is a bad fit, then you don't need to be teaching. That's just the fact. And I've known people that have gone through a 30 or 40-year career and they say, okay, I know I'm done now. My patience level is gone. I don't have the energy to welcome in a new class. And that's a hard place to be. But as a teacher, when I finish recording this episode and then I go over it with my producer, John, I'm going to leave and go to school. And it's the week before spring break. And we have a play production and we have sports every single day this week. And it's going to take a lot of patience for me, which sometimes wears me out. And I come home at the end of the day and I just go to sleep. But that's okay because teaching is a noble profession and I'm kind of designed to do that. A lot of us are designed to teach. This doesn't mean I quit when I have a bad day. And it's an interesting statistic that my pastor, Michael Catt, used to say that the average pastor leaves a church because of 8 people. And he said, but actually that carries over into the job, that a lot of us just leave because of 1 or 2 people. But if it's us that's not able to do the teaching and we do find ourselves to be doing harm, because here's the thing, our job is so important because it has lifelong consequences. There are teachers that can cause such harm that it can require time to undo the stinking thinking that comes from the interaction with that teacher. I've come across them in my career, and I have just prayed and wished they would just get out. And people will say, are they still in teaching? They really did a lot of harm. Now, I'm going to tell you that number out of all of the thousands and thousands of teachers that I've known, maybe it's been 5. So it's not like it's been a lot of teachers, but they are there. And so I need to say that because you don't want to be that person who is doing harm. Number 12 is to take a hard look for having longevity as a teacher. And yes, I'm going to go a little bit into my faith here, is to understand how to fight. We all have fears. We can have fear of the future. We can have fear of the unknown. We can have anxiety that comes from living in our world today. I was reading an old psalm, I believe it was Psalm 62, and King David was talking about how people were nice to his face and talking bad about him behind his back. And I realized that politics has been this way forever. Is it probably worse now than it has been? Maybe so, maybe not. We've had some pretty bad times in politics where people don't treat each other with respect. But that's not going to change me treating others with respect. Many years ago, I was struggling with a student, and I made a promise to myself I'd never walk into a classroom unless I could honestly say I loved that child. And I actually talked to Betsy, who worked next to me at the time, and explained to her, there's this particular child I'm having trouble with, and I've promised myself I'm not going to walk in that classroom unless I can honestly say I love that child. And there was something the child did in assembly that was just kind of over the top, and it really kind of triggered me. And I said, hey, we're coming back from break. You have your planning period. Would you just stand in my door for a second? I have everything written on the board. They need to start. I need to go back in the bathroom. And I'll be honest, I went back in that bathroom and I prayed because I didn't have the patience to teach that child spreadsheets because he was not acting right. I prayed it through. I came back. And do you know that about 3 or 4 years after that student graduated, I'm not going to say too much about his career because people who know me would know who it was, but he came back and thanked me because he said he used spreadsheets in his inspection job for the government every single day. Every single day. And you know what? I'm so thankful that I was able to detach the behavior of that child from his worth as a human being. I don't want to ever label children. So understanding where I am, verbalizing it to others, sometimes verbalizing it to myself or praying out loud in the car so I can kind of understand where I am is part of what we have to do so that we can fight well. I have a book that I've been drafting for many years about it's a battle we fight in life, and we have different things in our minds we have to fight at different times. For me, from grade 5 through 9, I was really picked on and called ugly names and told I was not a person of worth and nobody would ever love me. My husband always says, be careful about who you let live rent-free in your head. I had to learn how to deal with those voices. And my classroom is called a masterpiece theater. I'm in a Christian school, so I'm allowed to do that. But even if I wasn't, I'd probably still call it masterpiece theater or maybe not give them the verse. But it's Ephesians 2:10 that you and I are both a masterpiece created for good works in Christ Jesus. Now, yes, that verse says in Christ Jesus. Now, I'm going to treat every person on this planet as a masterpiece because they are. I remember when I was in the Middle East and I was speaking and I had a really comfortable chair, a seat of honor. But there was this woman who was very pregnant, probably due in a couple weeks, and she had on the full garb of a Middle Eastern woman. I saw her eyes, they were just beautiful. And you know what? She was sitting on the stairs. And so I got up, and I know that I didn't follow protocol, but I did it anyway. I got up and I offered her my chair and got her to sit there. And you know what? She was so grateful because I see each person as a masterpiece. And when I get down or fearful or afraid, my mom always taught me, find people to serve. Pastor Michael always said, walk slowly through the crowd. Everybody has a hurt. And there's so many people to serve and there's so many people to help. And as a teacher, part of what I do with my students is help them and serve them. We're doing coding right now, and so I look and see who's been struggling and may not be saying anything, and I go to them and I say, hey, I see you've been working on this problem in coding for 5 minutes. Do you need help? It is a hard profession that we do. Teaching is a noble profession, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your health and happiness. So my hope is that by implementing the things that I've shared in these 2 episodes, I also have an episode back from season 1 that I'll add to the show notes. If we can learn to set healthy boundaries, we're not being selfish. We're ensuring we can show up and do our best for our students day after day, year after year. And we can show up for our families and make happy memories and be able to leave work behind, not focusing on it all the time and telling our spouse our wins and not just the stresses, because the stresses never change. The names change, but the stresses don't. So thank you to our incredible guests for this episode, Charlie Peck, Morgane Michael, Michelle Singh, and Dr. Brad Johnson, for their wisdom and practical advice. And thank you for listening to the Cool Cat Teacher Talk Show. If you found value in today's episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to YouTube or just tune in every week right here on this station for the show. I hope you'll leave a review. Visit coolcatteacher.com/talk teaching for show notes, resources, and more episodes on topics that matter to educators. Until next time, this is Vicki Davis, the Cool Cat Teacher.
Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. Visit coolcatteacher.com.
I want to remind you that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's sustainable. See you later, educator.